Our episodes deal with serious and often distressing incidents. Listener discretion is advised. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is a sect set within the framework of Islam. The movement was formed in 1889 by Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. Ahmad himself was born in the small village of Qadian in Punjab, India. In 1889, he declared that he had a divine revelation authorizing him to accept the allegiance of the faithful. Then, in 1891, he declared himself to be the expected Messiah that the Prophet Mohamed had foretold as the awaited one, who would rule the world in preparation for the end of days. Ahmad's teachings incorporated Orthodox Islam and mixed in elements of Hinduism and Christianity. His supporters claimed that this move was an attempt to revitalise Islam in the face of the British Raj, the British rule in India, which lasted from 1858 to 1947. Ahmadiyyas, as a community, encourage interfaith dialogue while defending their Islamic roots and attempt to correct what they see as their perceived misunderstandings of the religion in the Western and Eastern world. In line with Orthodox Muslims, Ahmadiyyas pray 5 times a day and also observe the month-long fast of Ramadan. Despite this, there are significant feuds due to fundamental differences between Ahmadiyyas and Orthodox Muslims. Primarily, these fall within one aspect of the faith. In the Ahmadis do not believe that the Prophet Mohamed was the final prophet, instead referring to him as the perfect and complete prophet who foretold of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's arrival. Ahmadiyyas also differ from Orthodox Christians on their views of Jesus. They believe that rather than dying on the cross, Jesus instead fainted before being brought down and travelled to India to preach before dying of natural death in ripe old age. The Ahmadiyya community pride themselves on being inclusive of all people, regardless of religion, and ensuring their debates, even if heated, are non-violent. That sentiment is not always shared across the Muslim community. Violence towards Ahmadiyya Muslims takes place throughout the world due to their beliefs, both at the hands of Christians and other branches of Islam. In Bangladesh and Pakistan, where there are a conjoined approximate 5 million Ahmadi adherents, there is a culture of persecution against the faith, with Pakistan actively suppressing the religion through their constitution. In the United Kingdom, multiculturalism has however led to integration across racial and ethnic communities, which meant that many Ahmadis have over time sought asylum within the UK. Debates can be found on YouTube of UK-based Ahmadis and Muslims of other denominations heatedly but respectfully debating their faith stances on various issues. Asad Shah, a shopkeeper living in Shawlands, Glasgow, had seen many of these debates online. He created his own YouTube channel in November of 2013 so that he too could share his own experiences in the hope of giving society at large a more comprehensive understanding of the Ahmadiyya faith. A Facebook page for Asad soon followed to share his message of Ahmadiyya. Not all was rosy in his world, however. Asad had recently started receiving threatening phone calls concerning some of the things he had been saying in his videos. Still, Asad had no intention of being taken away from his calling. I'm JS, and this is Skinwalker. Asad Shah was born in Rabwa, Pakistan in 1976. Rabwa was the historic capital of the Ahmadi faith to which the Shah family subscribed. Asad himself was the eldest of 7 brothers in his family, who earned their keep through a pharmacy which they owned in Rabwa. Pakistan itself had only gained independence from India in 1947, upon which many Ahmadis flocked to Rabwa to create their version of paradise on earth. By the mid-1950s, there had already been several flashpoints between the Orthodox Muslim population and the Ahmadi community. Then, when Pakistan outlawed Ahmadis from, quote, posing as Muslims in 1984, intolerance was flowing strongly against the community, even in their native Rabwa. Locals grew ever more intolerant of Ahmadis within their midst. The Shahs awoke one night to their pharmacy being burnt down by locals, an apparent threat against them. The Shahs themselves were living in a flat above the pharmacy, only narrowly avoiding being killed by the rapidly spreading flames. Sitting in contemplation at the charred wreck of their family's livelihood, their father felt Britain provided a much safer alternative than staying in Pakistan in the current climate. So, the family applied for asylum. When the British government granted their application, it was initially only the Shah family's father who was approved to go, with this taking place sometime in the mid-1990s. Then, in 1998, the entire remaining family had their applications approved for asylum. They packed their belongings and said goodbye to their native Rabwa. They had uprooted everything they owned and moved to Glasgow. Once he had established himself within the area of Shawlands, Asad and his family took over and ran Shah's newsagents and convenience store on Menard Road, nearby to a small footbridge over railway tracks which connect Shawlands and Pollokshields in Glasgow's south side. He was a man of slight stature, but with a huge heart. Standing only 5 foot 8 inches tall, with a very slender build and a closely cropped beard, he was made only slightly larger by the flowing robes of his people that he wore daily, and slightly taller by the takia hat which always lay perched on his head as a symbol of his faith. Asad was a proud husband to Tayyaba and a father of 3 children, and despite being a native of Rabwa, described himself to his brother as a proud Glaswegian. With the local corner store a significant part of community life in Glasgow, Asad was deeply embedded within and respected by his community. Locals who came into his shop were not Dave or Hannah, they were son and daughter. He was proud to be a Glaswegian, and Glaswegians were proud to have him in turn. A friendly and caring man, he was known to forgive debts when customers forgot a method of payment, and would even play games with customers' children as their parents shopped. While keeping people fed and watered, he would always offer his advice and a listening ear, free of judgment and free of charge. The advice was provided, even if it was contrary to his own ability to profit, as evidenced by his telling locals that he would sooner see them quit smoking than continue making money at the expense of their health. His caring nature was well received, and there was always some level of interest in his rather unusual religion, which many locals had never heard of before him introducing them to it. This likely played some part in leading him to what he felt was a great idea: promoting his message online. Social media was developing incredibly quickly and provided an easy platform to share ideas, content, and discussion with people who cared to engage. With this in mind, Asad signed up for YouTube and Facebook accounts to interact with the local and online community. On November 4, 2013, Asad posted his first video, which was entitled Holy Quran from Heaven on Earth. It was a short-form blog with imagery and music designed to introduce people to his ideas in a bite-sized chunk. As his channel progressed, he moved away from the produced imagery, and following videos were mostly him in solo dialogue discussing his beliefs, teachings, and his understanding of his religion and religious journey in varying contexts. He spoke both Urdu and English in the videos, although mostly kept to one language throughout the one recording. Throughout 2015 and 16, Asad continued to post videos on YouTube and Facebook, mainly those which expressed his love for others, humanity, and the way he felt his religion could provide answers to those in need. One particularly popular video shows Asad lifting a young white boy from Shawlands up as he presents him and his mother with a birthday cake for the boy. His kind and gentle nature was further demonstrated through the titles of his YouTube content. These included Ahmadi for all beloved mankind in Millennium, Let's create and have live-love relation with two-sided communication with our beloved Creator. Eid Mubarak to all beloved mankind. We are created with love and for love. Create love, unity with equality in all beloved mankind. And the 100% right teaching for all beloved new and coming generations from all nations. His Facebook posts often came with long and caring messages accompanying the content, and he regularly engaged with users of the page when they posted in the comments section, usually signing off his messages with the term Bismillah. This Arabic phrase means "in the name of God" and signified how important Asad's faith was to him. Thursday, March 24, 2016 was a day like any other for Asad Shah. At 40 years old, he set off to open his shop and serve the people of his local area. In the downtime he had during the day, he used his social media channels to communicate with his friends and followers. The next day would be Good Friday, a particularly important day in the Christian calendar, being the Remembrance Day commemorating the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Asad was a firm believer in the teachings of Jesus alongside that of his religion, and shared a post on his Facebook page to wish his Christian friends well for the upcoming event. The post read, "Good Friday and very happy Easter, especially to my beloved Christian nation. Bismillah. let's follow the real footsteps of beloved holy Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, and get the real success in both worlds. Asad signed off his message with 4 kisses, a show of affection for the readers and his local community. He then returned to his working duties, talking to customers as he sold them goods to while away the time. At 9:10 p.m, a man walked into Shah's newsagents and convenience store. He walked around the store, looking at various items, then approached Asad, who was at this point sat at his desk. By 9:11 p.m, the discussion they were having had turned into a confrontation and was becoming more animated by the second. The large man at the other side of the cash desk raised a finger in some form of warning to Asad. The large man firmly told Asad that should he not stop describing himself as a prophet, he would kill him. By this point, at 9:12 p.m, Asad had offered no retraction, only a hand to shake. In return, the man pulled a knife from underneath his robes and began stabbing Asad. Asad's brother, Attar, and a shop assistant, Stephen McFadden, were working in the store at the time. Attar was downstairs in the basement of the premises. However, upon hearing the disturbance, had returned to the shop floor. Both he and Stephen leapt onto the man, attempting to stop the attack. Attar screamed for the man to stop, pleading for his brother's life. When the man did not stop, Attar hit him with a newspaper stand which was nearby. The man then started to drag Asad outside onto the pavement, continuing to stab him during the struggle. At this point, Stephen McFadden managed to disarm the man, and the knife fell to the ground. In the struggle, Asad Shah suffered a cut to the neck. The man continued to punch Asad's face and then stamped on his body during the attack. Later analysis would reveal the attack had left Asad with 30 stab wounds or lacerations, as well as fractures to his nose, jaw, cheekbones and skull, and had his ribs broken. One forensic analyst noted that these types of injuries, bar the knife wounds, were more commonly seen in road traffic accidents rather than in murder victims. As Asad lay collapsed by the side of the road, his brother Attar managed to sling him up over his shoulder and began to run for help. The man who had attacked him inside the shop kicked out at Attar as he ran. Then, content with his handiwork, calmly walked away from the scene while laughing and grinning, then sitting down at a local bus shelter. As he took his seat, he bowed his head as if in prayer. The attack had lasted around 4 minutes from beginning to end. Emergency services quickly attended the scene and rushed Asad to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, Glasgow's mega hospital. Despite their best efforts and treatment, Asad died in hospital at 10 p.m, less than an hour after the frenzied attack. His killer was apprehended by the police attending the scene and offered little resistance to his arrest. CCTV footage, later recovered from the shop, allowed for a quick reconstruction of the events which had taken place before and during Asad's murder, without the need to rely heavily on the testimony of the 2 other men in the shop, who were attempting to be helpful but were incredibly traumatised by the murder. The arrival of the police on scene set in motion 24 hours of forensic searches within the area. On the next evening of March 25, 2016, as the police tape was removed from outside of Asad's store, Shawlands locals came to pay their respects. Asad was beloved in Shawlands, a fact which was demonstrated by the 500 people, including the First Minister for Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, who turned up to a silent vigil outside of his shop that evening. Tributes were left in the form of kind messages, flowers, and interfaith commemoration of a much-loved member of the community. One high-profile supporter of the family was Prince Charles, who sent a letter to the family in the aftermath, speaking of his sadness at the events and offering his support. Several more vigils were held for Asad Shah over the coming days. The police were still actively investigating both the scene and the evidence, despite having a man in custody. They came forward to state that a full investigation was underway to establish the entire set of circumstances and that the attack was being treated as religiously prejudiced. When this was said, many people across Scotland were unaware the attacker had come from the Muslim community and assumed that it had been a white-on-Muslim hate crime. That was until the media released the suspect's name in the evening papers. His name was Tanveer Ahmed. Tanveer Ahmed hailed from Toller in Bradford, within the Yorkshire region in England, which lies south of the border between England and Scotland, and is over 200 miles from Glasgow. He was born in Pakistan and had emigrated to southern England, then moved north to Bradford in 2001. Tanveer was a married man of above average height and stocky build, who had 3 children with his wife. He too sported the taqiyya hat of his faith and a beard. In 2016, he was then 32 years old and working as an Uber taxi driver with no criminal record. His Sunni Muslim faith was the bedrock of his life, and he was well recognised and in good standing within his faith's community as a proud adherent. The profile of Tanveer, which would be painted by those who knew him in a professional or a personal capacity, was not that of a typical offender in the realm of religious extremism. One former colleague from a previous taxi firm noted that Ahmed seemed like he was just a normal guy, and while he was a religious man, he was never fanatical, with the most he ever pushed religion to him being in the form of a mild rebuke to remind him to pray. Ahmed had become aware of Asad's proselytising online, having been shown it by a friend when he was visiting Glasgow at the beginning of March. He had then sourced the name and number of the man in the video from his friend, who knew him to be Asad Shah from Shawlands in Glasgow. Calling the number he had been given, Ahmed had an argument over the phone with Asad in the days running up to his murder, informing him he was deeply upset over his claims to be a prophet and his philosophical outlook. He informed Asad to cease doing what he was doing, both in person and online. When he did not get the desired effect, seeing posts the very next day from Asad, he decided to fix the problem in person. On March 24, 2016, Ahmed worked himself into a frenzy. He rushed into the same car which he used every day as an Uber taxi and headed to Glasgow to confront Asad. Whilst driving to Glasgow, he watched numerous videos of Asad on his phone, growing increasingly irate at what he heard. As he passed the Scottish borders, he left a voice message on the voicemail of the friend he had met in Glasgow. He stated that the situation, meaning Asad Shah's proselytising, quote, needs nipped in the bud. As he arrived in Glasgow, he committed the horrendous acts described on Menard Road, which would write his name into the infamous annals of Scottish criminal justice. The police had initially tied his actions with Asad Shah's celebration post for the Christian festival of Easter. However, this being the specific trigger point for Tanveer Ahmed's decision to head north to Scotland was disproven when the timeline of travelling 200 miles between 5 PM and 9 PM could not have easily accounted for Ahmed's journey in the aftermath of the post having been put on Facebook. Whilst possible, it seemed improbable. This position was further disproven when Ahmed himself said it was not his single flashpoint when interviewed under caution by the police. His justification for the crime was on the face of it, not one single action, but a culmination of actions by Asad Shah. Blaming Asad Shah's online proselytising and claims of prophethood for his decision, repeated blasphemy was the flashpoint described by Tanveer Ahmed. Blasphemy is a very sensitive issue within the Muslim world, being a considerable hot topic even within the most liberal circles of Islam. Most of the Islamic world would push for a prison sentence or rebukes for such a transgression, not the murder of the supposed blasphemer. The real driving force behind Ahmed's reaction concerning the perceived blasphemy had a further root, which was not yet discovered at the time. In Pakistan, on January 4, 2011, a man named Malik Mumtaz Qadri, most commonly referred to simply as Mumtaz Qadri, murdered a local liberal Pakistani politician named Salman Taseer. Salman Taseer had been the governor of the Punjab region since 2008 and had been using his influence to attempt to reform much of the blasphemy laws in the region, appearing on a local TV station, Sama TV, to voice his opinion and state that he was filing a mercy petition for a Pakistani Christian woman named Asia Noreen Bibi, who had been sentenced to death for blasphemy. Qadri was one of Taseer's bodyguards, and when they attended Kosar Market near his home in Islamabad, Pakistan, he opened fire on Taseer with an AK-47 assault rifle. Salman was hit nearly 30 times and succumbed to his injuries. Qadri was sentenced to death by hanging for his crime, but developed a large following in death. After his execution at Adiala jail in Rawalpindi, many thousands came to Qadri's funeral, believing that he had defended the faith appropriately. One such defender, albeit from a distance, was Tanveer Ahmed. Dilpazir Awan, the brother of Mumtaz Qadri, stated to the BBC in the aftermath that Tanveer Ahmed had spoken with him regarding executing Asad Shah as a result of his supposed online blaspheming. He further alleged that Ahmed had told him that he had a dream in the days running up to March 25th, whereby he saw Qadri sat next to him. Qadri then declared that Allah had chosen him for a noble duty, that of murdering Asad Shah, and that Qadri believed in him and loved him. This dream stilled any waning resolve in Ahmed's heart. A murder in Punjab, Pakistan 5 years previously undoubtedly had a horrific effect on the fate of a blissfully unaware man living in Shawlands in the south side of Glasgow. Ahmed was brought in front of the court the next day to be charged. He entered no plea in relation to the intended prosecution for the charge of murder against Asad Shah. The family of Asad Shah released a statement to the police and the public, thanking them for their kindness and compassion throughout the ordeal. Around this time, the Muslim Council of Scotland also issued a statement to urge people to keep calm, stating that there was a real feeling of anxiousness. Several imams, the name for local leaders within the Muslim faith, also called for unity across faiths and spoke out against the violence and sectarianism which had led to Asad Shah's murder. Asad Shah was finally laid to rest in early April of 2016 as friends and family attended the Ahmadi Mosque where he worshipped in Glasgow. Underneath the words etched on the wall of the Ahmadiyya Community Hall of Glasgow, "Love for all, hatred for none," a community elder, Mansour Shah, made a statement at Asad's funeral. He told the community to remain united and compassionate despite the situation, and further thanked the people of Glasgow for their kindness and care around the murder of Asad. Amar Anwar, a local lawyer and politician who was representing the Shah family, made a statement that the call for calm and condemnation of the acts was welcomed, and remarked that across all Scottish mosques, thoughts and prayers from thousands of Muslims were being reserved for Asad Shah. With Asad laid to rest, the weight of public scrutiny returned to the impending trial of Tanveer Ahmed. On April 6, while in custody awaiting trial, Ahmed instructed his solicitor, John Rafferty, to release the following statement before Sheriff Brian Adair, despite his pending trial. The statement read, "This all happened for one reason, and no other issues and no other intentions. Asad Shah disrespected the Messenger of Islam, the Prophet Mohamed, peace be upon him. Mr. Shah claimed to be a prophet. When 1400 years ago, the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him, has clearly said that I am the final messenger of Allah. There is no more prophets or messengers from God Allah after me. I am leaving you the final Quran. There is no changes. It is the final book of Allah, and this is the final completion of Islam." One solicitor noted to a local newspaper, the Daily Record, in the aftermath, that they had never in their full legal career heard of an accused making such an admission of guilt while within a live case. On April 20th, a campaign called United Against Extremism was launched in the wake of Asad Shah's death. It comprised of an interfaith group of Ahmadi Muslims, Christians, Jews and Sikhs seeking to foster understanding around and stand up to extremism within Britain. The case was brought up in the British Parliament, and United Against Extremism's mission was endorsed by then Scottish National Party leader in Westminster, Angus Robertson, and then British Prime Minister, David Cameron. Ahmed remained in custody prior to being brought before a private hearing in the High Court in Glasgow on the 8th of July. He pled guilty to the charge of murder laid against him, with a plea in mitigation that the actions of Asad Shah in uploading videos claiming to be a prophet had contributed to his own actions in turn. The judge acknowledged his position, and Ahmed was returned to be remanded in custody, pending sentencing. On that same date, BBC Newsnight ran an expose on the case with audio footage from Asad Shah, Asad's brother. In a strong Glaswegian brogue, tinged slightly with the accent of his family's motherland, his brother described the intense feelings of loss over his brother, who only ever wanted to strengthen and unite his community. He also described Tanveer Ahmed as an enemy of humanity. Ahmed then had a recorded phone call released onto YouTube. On this call, he referred to the Shah family as Qadiani, a derogatory term for adherents to the Ahmadi faith, and said he felt little sympathy for what he had put them through, mentioning that his God's judgment was all he cared for. He expressed little care for the length of sentence he was to receive for the crime. Prior to his sentencing, several pages were created on Facebook in support of Tanveer Ahmed, which generated thousands of likes, both from residents of the United Kingdom and Pakistan. Facebook were initially slow to remove these pages, although most were in the process of being deleted as Ahmed's sentencing approached. In August of 2016, Tanveer Ahmed was brought before Lady Rita Ray, one of Scotland's foremost legal minds, to have his sentencing hearing heard. Lady Ray issued a damning sentencing statement condemning Ahmed's actions, discussing Ahmed's mitigation and that Asad Shah's actions had contributed to his own. She noted that he had provided no evidence that this had been the case. Lady Ray further told Ahmed, when considering his statement that Asad Shah had been murdered as a result of disrespecting the Prophet Mohamed, quote, "Let me be clear. No one in any civilised country, including Scotland, has the right to take the life of another, whatever offence that individual perceives that he or she has suffered. It is vitally important in modern society that respect and tolerance for others of every race, creed, colour, ethnic origin, or religious belief is maintained and protected by the law of the land." Tanveer Ahmed was then sentenced to serve a minimum of 27 years in prison. His initial tariff was set at 30 years, with a 3-year discount being given on the charge, given that he had no previous criminal associations or convictions and had pled guilty early on within proceedings. Lady Ray finished by noting that at no point had he considered the impact of his attack on Asad's family, and the attack itself was an appalling display of merciless violence. When being led away from the courtroom, Ahmed raised his fist and shouted in Arabic, "Praise for the Prophet Mohamed, there is only one Prophet." His family and friends, who had sat in the public gallery, raised their arms in support and repeated the phrase which Ahmed had shouted prior to returning to their cars for the 200-mile return journey to Yorkshire. Tanveer Ahmed was initially held at Her Majesty's Prison Barlinnie in Glasgow. Despite his claims that he only cared for the judgment of his faith in his sentence, in December of 2016, Ahmed applied to have the length of his conviction overturned. He hoped to achieve a different outcome than he had at trial through two considerations. The first, he argued, was that the sentence given was in his eyes excessive, as he had no previous criminal record. Furthermore, his conviction was religiously motivated, not religiously aggravated. The second point of law which he argued was that he was given insufficient discount from his initial sentencing tariff for pleading guilty at the earliest possible stage, being given only 3 years off of his sentence for his assistance. His appeal was rejected out of hand and given no legal basis to continue. Ahmed was returned to jail to serve his sentence as it was handed down in August of 2016. Ahmed is currently being held in HMP Shotts, a 553 prisoner capacity, maximum security prison in North Lanarkshire, Scotland. In a chilling parallel to what happened with his idol Malik Mumtaz Qadri in the aftermath of his murder in retaliation to perceived blasphemy, so too did Tanveer Ahmed become somewhat of a local celebrity for the more radical followers of Islam. It has been alleged that throughout his imprisonment, he has sold merchandise and held paid meet and greets with enthralled fans under the guise of prison visitation. Prison staff have publicly stated they have seen such visitors praying deeply in their vehicles before entering the building. Some have come from hundreds of miles away just to spend an hour in his presence. Ahmed has allegedly boasted to prison staff and other inmates that the money is being collected and held for him by a suspected middleman in an account on the outside world. The account, it is alleged, is unconnected to his name. In early 2017, it was further alleged that Ahmed had converted to a more peaceful version of Islam, with prison sources stating he had turned a new leaf. Relaxations were made based on this statement. A later analysis of calls made by Ahmed inside Shotts prison showed that he had not been speaking only with his wife, friends and family, but showed he had made contact with a prominent hate preacher in Pakistan, Kadim Rizvi, who also admitted to having spoken directly with Tanveer Ahmed while incarcerated. It was on Rizvi's Facebook page that many of Tanveer Ahmed's recordings became public. An investigation into his calling pattern also showed that the Scottish Prison Service had not been actively translating Ahmed's calls, which he largely placed in Urdu, into English for content examination. Siobhan McDonough, a Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden in Greater London, who chairs the government's parliamentary group on the Ahmadi community, expressed concerns over the Scottish Prison Service's capabilities, given the ramifications of the messages which Ahmed was alleged to be spreading to the outside world. After these allegations became public, Tanveer Ahmed was banned from making any external calls. Critics once again stated that his teachings would be just as effective written down as spoken over the phone, and called for a total communications ban. This was not enforced. A cousin of Ahmed's, Sherbaz Munir, described his actions as being that of a total gentleman, and that his cousin was a chosen one, as he had murdered a blasphemer. Hundreds of supporters rallied around his family's home in Mirpur, Kashmir, to celebrate Ahmed's actions. A further video then emerged of Tanveer Ahmed in prison, sending greetings to other members of his faith, celebrating the holy festival of Eid. The general message was similar to that of all faiths during religious celebrations, to respect the beliefs during such a holy time. His final words, however, differed from those used by the vast majority of Muslims when he issued a call to action. He stated, quote, "The penalty for those who insult the Prophet, cut their heads from their bodies." How he was able to obtain a recording device and access the internet is unknown, in light of the supposed ban by the Scottish Prison Service. Some critics have suggested this video may have come from his time in HMP Barlinnie and is unrelated to his confinement within Shotts. Ahmed's phone ban was eventually revoked, with the condition that all of his calls were monitored and translated to be cross-referenced against any known individuals with relations to terror offences, extremism, or access to distribute such material. In April of 2018, Muslim men who provided chaplaincy services to Ahmed within Shotts prison believed they had been subject to the issuing of a death warrant by Tanveer Ahmed. The chaplains had worked together with the government's Prevent programme, a programme aimed at tackling the problem of extremism in the United Kingdom, to gather data on him during his time in Shotts prison. The chaplains alleged that on online forums, their names had been distributed, which compromised their safety. In their assessment, an internal source told the Sunday Herald newspaper that the Scottish Prison Service believed it to be a credible threat and had developed new additional security procedures to protect the chaplains in their work. A radical preacher from Pakistan, Syed Muzaffar Shah Qadri, had severe protests to a planned speech at Falkirk Central Mosque in December of 2016 due to his vocal support of both Tanveer Ahmed and Mumtaz Qadri's actions. Siobhan McDonough once again spoke publicly of her surprise that a man whose teachings were radical enough to have him banned from travelling to Karachi in his native Pakistan was allowed to come to the United Kingdom to preach. Fiyaz Mughal, the director of a large multi-faith anti-extremist group called Faith Matters, noted similar concerns in what Syed Qadri's entrance to the UK could do to inflame cultural tensions within the UK. The event's organisers stated that he was part of a variety of speakers being hosted that month, and they were unaware of his status as being banned in Pakistan. Ahmed has on numerous occasions issued appeals to have his imprisonment commuted to a prison nearby to his native Bradford. He has not been successful thus far. Unfortunately, life is not a work of fiction. There are no well-defined beginnings, middles and ends, and suffering through the worst of times does not always lead to an improvement in circumstances after the fact. The death of Asad fell within this category, as his death was not the end of the Shah family's suffering. As he lay cold in the morgue, they still had to pick up the pieces of their life in the aftermath of the event. A GoFundMe page, set up by Shawlands locals after the attack, raised in the region of £110,000 for the Shah family. But well meant as it was, money was not what the Shah family wanted. They wanted acceptance for their worldview and Assad to brighten their day once more. Despite the show of compassion and love from the local community, many of Assad's family members left the UK in the aftermath of the attack. His close family, barring his brother Attar, all left after the shop on Menard Road was sold. The general feeling for the family was that they had fled Pakistan to avoid persecution for being Ahmadi, yet that same religious vitriol which had caused them to leave Pakistan had affected them even in the UK. A family member of Assad's noted that she felt the divide between Orthodox Muslims and Ahmadis seemed even more prominent after the murder of Asad. She noted on many occasions having offered the common greeting of the faith Assalamu alaikum to members of the wider Muslim community she passed, and receiving no response in return. This could have been a heightening of tensions, or perhaps she had become more vigilant in the aftermath of the event. Furthermore, a number of anonymous pages relating to Ahmadiyas began to spread videos on YouTube of Asad Shah speaking around prophethood and his own belief in himself as a vessel of the prophets. These attempted to portray Asad in a negative light, justifying his murder, and commonly used similar titles to videos that Asad himself had posted previously. Asad's honest and compassionate character was given no such voice in these videos. In a further cruel twist, Asad's wife Tayyaba died on November 13, 2018 of pancreatic cancer after a short illness, having become ill whilst visiting family in India. Her condition prior to travelling was described as healthy. She left behind the couple's 3 children, who had already lost their father 2 years previous. It seems the tragedy that marred the Shah family's lives in March of 2016 continues to hang over them thereafter.